Hi guys, welcome back to another GJ video, and today we're going to be doing the ultimate showdown between the latest AMD Ryzen 1800X CPU against two Intel, pretty much what I would say high-end CPUs. We're doing the 7700K and also comparing them to the 5960X. Now the 5960X is a little bit older, but what AMD is aiming this at is the 6900K, which I don't have one of those chips, and I think the 5960X is the closest to the 6900K you can get. So in this video, I'm pretty much going to jump in straight to performance testing. I'm not going to go too much on the X370 chipset, although we did get sent the Aorus AX370 Gamified motherboard. Really nice motherboard. It's got a heap of RGB features. It's really nice. So we've thrown that in our AMD Ryzen system. Just behind me, I built up 3 identical systems. So I'll just give you a run through on those systems. So I built the Ryzen system and then 2 Intel systems, one based on X99 and one based on Kaby. I wanted to do this to give you a rough idea on where Ryzen sits in the chain. It's been a while since AMD has been, or even being able to compare an AMD CPU against an X99 chip, even a Z170, even a Z97, even Kaby Lake. I would never have imagined I would be able to test an AMD chip against such high-ranking CPUs like the Intel ones. When I was actually building these systems, I've got like the ultimate high-end gear going in these, and I'm sort of thinking, have I made this too tough for this chip? Is it going to just get completely demolished? Well, we'll have a look at that later on. But for the main system, so we paired these two together. I wanted to keep as much as I could similar. Like the cases are the same, the Define S's from Fractal Design, all-in-one coolers are from Fractal Design, the T12 all-in-ones. Wanted to keep them the same. PSU's the same. Hard drives are all Seagate 2TB, 7200 RPM. SSDs are all ADATA 240 gig SSDs. RAM, I was going to keep all the same speed, but I changed it at the start, just when I started benching, because I thought if I'm doing out of the box testing, so the first phase I'm doing in this video is all out of the box testing, just simply taking this out, making sure the BIOS is right, the right out of the box settings, and just sort of going nuts in the benchmark. So when I thought out of the box setting for X99, so 21v3, memory for that is 2133 out of the box. Kaby Lake out of the box memory support is 2400 megahertz, and for your Ryzen it's 2667. Now funny enough, with this board I was not able to get 2667. For me, I don't have any 2667 memory, but I couldn't get any RAM. I had to go either down to that speed or up to that speed, no matter what I tried. So all these benchmarks have been tested using 2400 megahertz on the Ryzen. X99 was 2133 and on the Kaby Lake was 2400 megahertz. But to me, I really don't think the memory really played too much in the test. Even when I ran the AIDA64 memory benchmark, the actual Ryzen came out top above the Kaby Lake system, even though the memory speeds were the same. So it was quite interesting there. And then X99 for memory tests, we all know that quad channel is pretty much going to demolish the dual channel setups. So yeah, that was pretty much the systems there. The Kaby Lake system had the brand new ASRock super carrier board. That's a really nice board. The X99 5960X, I did want the Godlike, but it couldn't fit because I used the Define S's. So I went down one to the X99 MSI Carbon Gaming, really nice board. And then all the video cards were 1080. 2 of them were the Arctic Storm Zotacs, but one of them was the Zotac 1080 Mini. I did want them all the same, but unfortunately I didn't have 3 at this time, but I did put all the clocks exactly the same, and I did test the Mini against the 1080 Mini against the Zotacs, and they were exactly the same as the Arctic Storm, so there was no difference there. So yes, I built all those systems up, ran some stress testing. I was really impressed that everything was rock solid. I had no issues. It's been a while since I built an AMD system where I can just set it up and just go nuts. I was installing I just wanted to completely smash the system by doing a heap of stuff. I was installing stuff, downloading stuff. I think I had 4 or 5 things installing. I was running test benchmarks in the background to stress it. It was just rock solid, so I was quite surprised with that. So that was really good. Anyway, I'm probably carrying on a little bit too long. We want to jump in and see these benchmarks. Just a quick sort of information about the CPU. This is the 7, so the 7 denotes the top of the range, sort of like your i7, I guess. So this is the 3.6. It turbos, or it has a boost of 4, and then it's got this thing called XFR. I guess if your system's feeling good, if you've got good cooling and whatnot, it'll jump to 4.1. So that's a pretty nice feature as well. So now you've got the sort of a reason to jump up to better cooling, and then you've got overclocking as well. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not doing any overclocking in this video. I pretty much was told on Sunday I was going to get this chip. I received it on Tuesday. It's now Thursday. I've spent the last previous day building all these systems and pretty much one day smashing out these out-of-the-box benchmarks. I haven't even looked at overclocking or sort of tried that yet. So out-of-the-box benchmarks first. Apart from that, last thing I'll cover is the wattage. So you're probably thinking, well, it's going to be pretty high wattage, but no, this runs at 95 watt. Well, 95 watt out of the box. For reference, the Kaby Lake 7700K will run at 91, and the monstrous 5960X is a whopping 140 watts. So that's pretty insane for this CPU to come out. And of course, it's eight cores and 16 threads, pretty much exactly the same as the 5960X, whereas the 7700K Kaby Lake is 4 cores and 8 threads. Anyway, we'll jump in, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to overlay the benchmarks results over the screen, and I'm going to run through each one rather than just playing them along through the video. I would just want to sort of describe and how I thought the results were and stuff like that. So we'll jump in and we'll have a look. Alrighty guys, so we've got all our benchmarks here. I'm just going to go through each graph at a time just to show you how I performed the tests and the results. Now, all the data you see here came from all these sort of tables here. It was all imported, gathered here from all the tests. I ran each one 4 times and got the average of each benchmark run. Now we'll just run through each of the ones. First off, I started with Cinebench. I couldn't test the CPU without going through Cinebench. Everyone's been wanting to know how this performs, how it goes up to a few Intel CPUs. So first of all, I did all threads. I did one thread. It was interesting because we have seen recent news that the 7700K is really good at single threaded, and that's where it might sort of shine above the rest. And also we did 8 threads. So having a look at all threads, we can see the 1800X here just absolutely demolishes the other 2 chips. Like this is about nearly 300 different against the 5960X, and then even more against the 7700K. I guess in a test like this, we always knew the 7700K isn't going to be able to compete against such a high core count chip, but to see 1627, that is just insane. I was not expecting that. Like I've actually just recently purchased a 5960X to go in my rendering machine, and to see it just get beaten by a chip like this, bear in mind this 1800X is on sale at PC Case Gear for $699. So that's, to me, looking so far at these results, is looking pretty good at the moment. And moving on to one thread, I wanted to see how the 1800X would go in one thread, because I always knew that 7700K would probably be best. That's sort of what it's known for. It's meant to be sort of lower sort of thread count or core count, but its core speed is really good, especially for gaming. And this sort of shows that in this test. We see 197 for one thread, and we see the 1800X at 157, and then the 5960X at 144. I'd say the reason why the 5960X was down because it is a little bit slower than the other 2 when it's at max speed. Moving on to 8 threads, I wanted to see how the 1800X went in terms of 8 threads, which makes it the same as the 7700K running at standard, all cores enabled, and it pretty much still beat that as well. So that was pretty sort of an interesting test there. And then once again, it does beat the 5960X at 8 threads. So pretty much on all of these, the 1800X shows really good results, except for the one thread, which we pretty much knew this 7700K was going to come out on top as well. And moving on to Blender, everyone's sort of been talking about Blender, the Ryzen Blender test. Now lower is better here. It runs in seconds or minutes, depending on how good or bad your system is. Ours were all in the seconds because we have some pretty decent hardware. And once again, you can see 1800X, pretty much 24 seconds to run that. That was super fast. 5960X was 27.3, still not bad. And then the 7700K was 34. I was actually surprised at the gap between the 5960X and the 7700K. It wasn't too bad for that. So quite interesting there, but the 24 score for the 1800X was just insane. I wasn't expecting it to be that much better than the 5960X. Looking at Handbrake, this one's a little bit tricky because there's no real benchmark in Handbrake. It's just a rendering transcoding program. So I actually found on legit reviews or somewhere that you can download this Big Buck Bunny test. It's just a standard MP4 file, and you output it to the high H.264 1080p at 30 frames. And I just rendered that 4 separate times, and just got the average. Now it does it in frames per second. It does do how long it took, but I just grabbed the frames per second result. And as you can see, once again, 1800X, 78 for that, 69 for the 5960X, and then 51 for the 7700K. So once again, we can start to see a pattern sort of come out with the 1800X, especially with workstation, workload, multi-core tasks. It's really sort of coming out on top, and I never would have thought a 5960X would be overtaken by a by an AMD chip. Now, taking a look at memory bandwidth, I didn't want to spend too much time on this, especially that I couldn't get the Ryzen memory at the right speed I wanted to at the default 2667. But pretty much here, 5960X, we could probably disregard this because it is the quad channel. We knew it was going to be on top in these tests. So we'll just take a look at the 1800 and the 7700K. You can even see the 1800X is still slightly topping the 7700K. Now these were both running at 2400 megahertz. As I said, I couldn't get the 1800 CPU running at the default 2667. So you can just see marginally better there. And this is in megabytes a second. Higher is better once again. And moving on to some gaming benchmarks. I really wanted to spend some more time on just doing general gaming stuff, but I just didn't have time. So I just had to run a lot of pre-sort of test benchmarks. You can just tick go, and then I can just grab the results. I really wanted to test Battlefield 1, but I just didn't have the time. So Unigine Heaven 4.0, once again, ultra quality, 1440p. And we can see once again the 1800X is still holding up. Well, it's actually overtaken the 5960X, but this is where the 7700K is really going to start to shine, especially with all the gaming benchmarks. They're going to use less cores, but they're going to start using just raw horsepower. So we can see the 7700K comes out on top, 2844, 2822 for the 1800X, and for the 5960X, 2770. So there's pretty much nothing in it. If we look at the minimum frames per second, 34, 25, 32, and the max, we've got 240, 230, 236. So very, very similar results there. So not too much difference there. Now, of course, I couldn't do this without running 3D Mark, especially TimeSpy and Firestrike. Taking a look here, we see TimeSpy seems to be able to utilize the multi-core CPUs better than the 7700K. So as you can see, 1800X pretty much comes out on, well, it's pretty much nearly identical to the 5960X. CPU score is literally this little bit better on the Ryzen chip. And then we've got the final score. Look, we've got 7,395, 7,381. Like, that's pretty much exactly the same. And these were run 4 times, so it's not just like I did it once and they just fluked the same result. And then the 7700K got 7,102, so just a little bit less there. Still pretty impressive. Moving on to 3D Mark Firestrike. Now this is where we see the 7700K and 3D Mark start to rise up a bit, because this is a 1080p run and it seems to favor the less core CPUs and the raw speed more. So as you can see, the final score for the 7700K was 17,000, pretty much nearly 18,000. 5960X was 17,682, and then the Ryzen chip was 16,000. So about 1.5K less than the 7700K, so a little bit less there. To me, I'm not really too concerned about 1080p gaming, especially when you're looking at this price range. I don't think too many people are even going to buy a 7700K and game on 1080p. You're probably going to be looking more towards 1440p. So, but yeah, pretty much still not too much difference there, especially between the 5960X and the 1800X. But you can see the combined for the 1800X is a little bit less. I'm not even sure what this test sort of does, because you've got the physics here, unless it's like a combine between all of them, but you'd expect the combine would still be better than the 5179 as opposed to these two, because these are much better here. But yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Now moving on to Cry Primal, last test. This just has a built-in benchmark. Higher is better, 1440p at Ultra, and we can see these results pretty much exactly the same. Looking at the 1800X and the 5960X, you would have sworn it was the same CPU. Like if we look at the average FPS, 76.25, 76.25, exactly the same. Minimum FPS was 58.75 and 59, and the max FPS was 88.75, 88.25. But then the 7700K slightly better, probably because the Cry Primal doesn't need all the cores, and it just benefits better from the raw speed of the 7700K. Alrighty guys, and that's pretty much it on my testing on the Ryzen 1800X CPU. Really impressed with the results. You're probably noticing one thing I didn't cover, and that was temperature results. Now when I started first testing this, I wondered why it seemed to be stuck on 64, 63 degrees. Straight in the BIOS in Windows, no matter how long the system was on for, if it was on for 5 seconds, on for now, it always showed roughly 64, 63 degrees. So I kind of led to believe there was an issue with a sensor somewhere. I don't know if it was the CPU or the board. I've only got one motherboard to test, so I'm not going to blame any at this stage. I think being so early in the release, we'll just have to see what other people come up with their results. So if I do overclocking testing, I will definitely add temperatures in those results. But yeah, other than that, really impressed with especially the Cinebench result. Like I've recently moved to 5960X as my main workstation render CPU, and to throw this in, which is a much cheaper. Like, I know you can't buy 5960X anymore, but they're still worth quite a bit, even secondhand. And to just be able to throw this in and see it absolutely demolish a 5960X at Cinebench is actually insane. So really impressed with that. For gaming, it seems like AMD has gone for a chip that can sort of kill two birds with one stone. It's great for workstation loads, multi-core applications, but it's also really good at gaming as well. And they've also done all of this with keeping it down to a relatively good price, because I think, what is it, $699 for a CPU that does all this is, I think, spot on. It's a really good price. And you've also got CPUs like this isn't the only one they're bringing out. We've got ones like the 1700. That's still an 8-core, 16-thread. We're looking at about 469 Australian for that. So it'll be insane how much slower that is. Like, if it's only a few percent slower, that's going to be a killer CPU. And you've also got the 1700X, which is 569. So you're starting to move down to sort of Kaby Lake price range there. So I'd say you're sort of around X99 pricing with this top one, and then the lower down you go, you sort of breach into Kaby Lake performance. And even things like the 3D Mark Time Spy score, really impressed with that. Pretty much stays up with the 5960X because it's multi-core performance as well. But yeah, really impressed with this. Can't really find any faults. It's just that temperature issue. I would have really liked to see how this sort of performed in temperature wise, because I did go to the effort to get all the coolers exactly the same, but I guess I'll have to leave that for another time. But anyway, I just want to thank AMD for sending out this whole kit. I did receive the media kit. I got the board, the CPU and the RAM as well, which is really sweet. I want to thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for next time.